Testing, 1, 2, testing.
Go for it. Okay, we'll call the policy committee meeting of the Board of Ed to order at 6:30. So we have a bunch of stuff on our agenda here. Quite a few policies to rescind. I would recommend, I'll just start it out saying that I think that we can waive the second read for these, but we'll go through them one by one and we can decide. So the first, also in your packet, you should have the notes from Shipman and Goodwin. So we'll start with the rescission. So the first one is policy 6080.21 bilingual instruction. This policy is not mandatory and may be repealed. It was last looked at in 2001. The policy generally reflects the requirements of state law and regulations. One of the things that Shipman and Goodwin said is that the state law is constantly changing with regard to this particular policy, and it would be impossible for this policy to remain up to date and go along with the state law. So because it's not mandatory, they recommend that we repeal it. Any questions or comments? Hi, Seth.
My general question or comment for all of these is going to be where can, even if it's not at the policy level, where can parents provide or find information about various programs and what the administration's perspective is on this. So those were two general questions for each.
Okay.
I have no argument with Cindy on all these.
So we have two EL teachers that one at the high school and one that covers pre-K through 8. And as soon as they are notified through registration that we have a new student coming in that needs EL services, they reach out to the families. And I believe we have some information on the website as well that they can access. And that makes it a state law. And as Diane said, it has changed probably every other year at least. In terms of the number of months that they recommend services for, or the types of services, but I do feel that our two teachers are really on top of it, do a lot of activities, kind of families and things like that.
To Galen's point, is there a process in place to update that since it does change so often if it's on the website?
Yes. Yeah, so that's through our normal policy process, and like Zoe and I attended a webinar this morning from Shipman. They go through all the new legislation, whether it's required policy or just new laws, and that's typically where we receive that information and pass that along. So that's right up on the website.
Oh, great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, Seth? He's shaking his head now. Okay. All right, so we're going to recommend rescission of 6080.21 and waive the second read. Are we good with that? Okay. Next policy is 6080.21.1 English learner students. Again, Shipman and Goodwin said this is not mandatory and may be repealed. They recommend repealing it because this is another policy where it will not remain up to date with the constantly changing at the state level. While the district must comply with federal and state requirements concerning English learners, a board level policy is not required. So it's pretty much the same. This one was last looked at in 2018.
A lot of these are very old, even early.
Yes.
Yeah,
So this, we're just really cleaning house in the 6000 series. So if we're good with rescinding that and waiving the second read. Yep. The next policy is 6080.24.2 magnet schools. Again, this policy is not mandatory and may be repealed. Students don't apply through our school. They apply directly to the magnet schools rather than through our board regulations. And there are no regulations on our website. And it is the district's responsibility to hold the PPT meeting for students with special needs. This was last looked at in 2000. So they recommend rescission. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Just have a trivia question. How many students do we have who attend magnet schools?
Well, yes, just looked at that the other day.
And do we provide transportation? Or is it on
The magnet school arranges transportation.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? We're good with rescission and we have a second read. Good. All right, the next policy is 6080.25, early childhood education. Shipman and Goodwin recommend repealing the policy because it is not mandatory and is outdated. Since 1997, the law has expanded significantly concerning services and education provided to preschool and kindergarten students. Any questions or comments?
I actually, this one and the next one, I kind of feel like, going back to Stephen's position on the mission statement, policy from the last meeting. I kind of feel like the current administration is definitely committed to these, and to our TCLC program, for example. But maintaining a policy expresses that, keeping a preschool, pre-kindergarten program, for example, and also some of the language in the kindergarten program, policy for early childhood, kind of expresses a priority of the board going forward. So I mean, we may want to reshape these and keep them in some form, maybe with more precise reference to our TCLC program, which in fact may need to be renamed now that there's not a separate town learning campus, town center learning campus. But I just kind of feel like a general statement that the board, supports early childhood learning, and especially for identified special needs students, because it also helps us to integrate special needs students into our special needs program kindergarten forward.
But that's a state statute. I mean, integrating special needs is done not only because we support it, but because it is by state and federal statute. You can't not do it. And
We can't not have special needs care for kindergartners, but there's nothing requiring us right now, I don't think, to have a pre-K program, right? I mean,
right,
that's
but
voluntary.
we're building a brand new building that incorporates pre-K. I think it's pretty self-evident that we support and will continue to support pre-K. This is something for policy.
So we're required to have the pre-K for our special needs students, and then in doing so, we need to have the peer playmates, peer partners. With that, and try and have that 50%. So the 3 classrooms and most likely 4 next year are basically the required program. I understand the position, and certainly, as you know and mentioned, we support early childhood, would be open to the idea of eventually expanding. I wonder if that means that's more in like a goal section though, or a goal of the board, or
Yeah, I didn't honestly, and
I
part
guess
of
we'd
my
have to be
ignorance, I didn't realize that we were required by statute to have
yes.
the current TCLC program. So, okay, my concern is no concern anymore.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments or concerns? Good. So we're good with rescission and waiving the second read? Great. The next policy is 6080.25.2 school readiness. The Shipman and Goodwin recommend repealing the policy because again, it is mandatory and outdated. Since 1998, the law has expanded significantly concerning services and education provided to preschool students. So essentially, it follows the same as the one we just discussed. Is there any other questions or comments or concerns? We're good for rescission and waive the second read. The next policy is 6110.2 classroom observations. Shipman and Goodwin recommend that the board repeal this policy because it is duplicative of policy and administrative regulations number 1361, visitors to the schools, that we adopted in January of 2022. Questions, comments, concerns? We're good for rescission. Wait a second, great. All right, the next policy is 6130.7 animal dissection alternatives. Again, Shipman and Goodwin recommend that we repeal this policy because this one is duplicative of policy 6130.2.2 curricular exemptions. So this is just more cleaning house, questions, comments, concerns. We're good to rescind and waive the second read, Grace. Policy 6141.312 migrant students. This policy was last looked at in 2014. This policy is not mandatory and may be repealed. Connecticut does not participate in the federal migrant education program. Migrant children are included in the definition of homeless children under the McKinney-Vento Act and is included in our board's homeless policy. If they meet additional aspects of the definition, unless the district receives another specific grant that requires a board-approved policy on this topic, this policy should be repealed. Any questions, comments, or concerns? I see Seth saying no. We're good for rescission? Yes.
Absolutely, and would it be in a tickle file if we do get a grant that take another look at this, open it up?
I would imagine so.
Just like institutional memory, right? But if this comes in, then do this.
Right.
Okay.
All right, so we are going to rescind and wait a second. All right, two more policies for rescission. 6146.1 student assessment. They Shipman and Goodwin recommend that we delete this policy because it is unnecessary. The provisions of this policy are governed by state testing requirements and federal law, confidentiality of student records. And this was last looked at in 1991. Any questions, comments, or concerns about rescinding this policy?
Did the policy committee meet between that one?
I am not sure. I don't think I would have any idea. All right, so we'll recommend rescission and waive the second read. So the last policy then for rescission would be 6161.3 comparability of services. Shipman and Goodwin recommend that this policy be repealed because it is unnecessary. In its grant application, the superintendent must certify that the district complies with the comparability of services requirements under Title I. However, there is no legal requirement for the board policy on this topic, and the existing policy simply mirrors select language from the federal law without regard to the grant requirements of the state, which administers the funding. Questions, comments, concerns? We're good to rescind and waive the second read. All right, now we're going to go to rescind and replace policies. So the first policy that we're looking at is 5070, promotion, acceleration, retention. And you'll see a bunch of changes to it. One of the things that we want to do is not only rescind and replace with the changes, but move it to the 6000 series. And so do we have a number that we want to replace it with?
Choose, I can make some suggestions.
You can make a suggestion. Pick a number that begins with a 6.
Pulling up so I don't duplicate anything.
So there's not much changed in this. It's mainly the first paragraph, and it would be in a 6000 series and called promotion and retention. A little language change at the bottom. It's mainly the first paragraph that changes with this. Shipman and Goodwin recommend that the board repeal and replace this with the updated model promotion and retention policy for consistency and legal compliance. And they recommend relocating it to the 6000 series.
I would propose 6020.
Excellent. All right, so we will then make this for rescind and replace from 5070 promotion, acceleration, retention to 6020 promotion and retention. And it would go from the student 5000 series into the 6000 series. Yes.
We have cases where the kids skip grades or leave college early.
We could have students leave college early. The trimester, I think, maybe discourages that because there's not like a middle of your senior year where students may I have not pushed forward a student in Madison since they've since I've been here, where a student came in and maybe was hired, from another country or something like that. I've had that happen before, but haven't had that happen here. We have retained students, of course, but I would say that's on a rare occasion. Try and work, the research on that is not, that's always impactful, but there are cases where it's been, I think, to the benefit of the kid and the family. Great, thank you. Just curious.
Anything else?
No, sounds good.
Yeah, so are we good with the changes as proposed and changing to the 6020 with the name change? Yes. Okay, and this will be a 2 read. We're not gonna try to accelerate that. Okay. All right, so we will rescind and replace and change it to 6020. The next policy is 5090.9. Use of private technological devices by students. So the policy is included in your packet. The policy was passed on June 6th of 23. We're not proposing any changes to the policy. What we did was add the regulation. So in your packet, you have a copy of the policy for your reference, but it's the regulation that is new. We don't vote on the regulation, but if there's something that you want the superintendent to change or don't like or grammatical error.
Yes, I could speak to it real quick. The policy should always be in conjunction, excuse me, the regs should always be in conjunction with the policy. So they should always, align. Our thoughts on this, and it was not necessarily meant to pass through committee tonight. We're open to continuing discussion and bring back any other data or information you want. This is certainly the hot topic for this school year,
Yes.
across the state and really across the country, where some states have completely banned cell phones during the school day. And I know Connecticut did think about that last year. And so I think that will probably come up again. Our thought on using a regulation versus a policy is that this could change, changed last year at the high school. And then for this school year, it changed at the middle school. So this reflects our current practice in all these areas. And I will say, 3.5 weeks into the school year, we've seen very good compliance with the new this regulation, basically how it stands today. And we've done a lot of work with staff and explained it with parents. I put it out to parents in my community letter. Every school put out their current practice and policies to their parent groups. I know principals spoke to it during open houses. So I think that we're in a good place right now, but we expect this conversation to continue.
My only question or comment was under pre-K to 5, where it says, the device must be on silent the entire day, remain out of sight and in a student's bag for the entirety of the school day, and while on school-sponsored transportation. And I guess I wonder why that last part is included specifically for pre-K to 5. Because I will tell you from my personal experience, there can be, especially in the beginning of the year, some changes or discrepancies with the school buses until things get settled. And I know that reluctantly, I bought my daughter a phone when she was in 5th grade because the bus driver kept forgetting to drop her off. And then I would have to contact, the school, the bus driving company, and then I would end up having to pick her up at the school after she rode around for the entire drive. And so for me, it was, I would be able to contact her and she could contact me to say, hey, make sure you tell the bus driver to stop. So that's just a very specific example.
Okay.
But I'm sure there are many parents who give the younger children cell phones for communication purposes, whether it's the bus is late and, maybe they didn't check their email or receive their notification or for whatever reason. And so I'm just wondering why this was specifically included.
Yeah, I think it was included because it addresses concerns we've had in the past with use of cell phones on transportation, that students haven't always made their best choices. And so when we've had to address that, it's, a ban on transportations has been helpful. The fact of the matter is we don't have anybody to monitor typically on the buses unless we have an issue or concern where an adult may be monitoring. And so if a student takes out their phone and texts parents to say, I'll be there in 5 minutes, or I'm on my way, I'm on a bus, we're not gonna be able to enforce that. But I think that the restriction and putting that out there, I think, hopefully encourages that it's more that's more of a one-off than, a frequent occurrence.
Okay. That was my only comment on this.
Yeah, I think this warrants a little bit of discussion, only because we've had a lot of public interest in this topic recently, not only in town with Madison Youth Unplugged, a group that formed in response to was it the Age of Anxiety or whatever that book was that sparked concerns about overuse of cell phones and communication devices among youth, and also at the state level, where obviously, the State Department just came out with a recommended policy, or at least not even a recommended policy or model policy as much as policy recommendations for districts who are interested in adopting policies. I think that first of all, as Craig has said, as Dr. Cook has said on occasion, on the continuum of mobile phone usage and device usage, we tend to be toward the stricter end of the scale rather than the more liberal end. And secondly, it seems right to have different age groups introduced at different, school levels to, more relaxed phone usage over time. I just think it makes sense. I kind of like where our policy is. I like taking the tack of maybe relegating it to not policy, but regulation, so that the district can and the administrators can respond to different issues that they find without having to come to the policy committee and the board all the time. I just kind of feel like it's the right balance, and there are competing interests here. I understand that there are strong parental concerns on the one hand about student anxiety, but with the rules we have in place and enforcing them, I think that it allows us to take our 21st century skills education charge and mission seriously, in that we can use the opportunity to teach good digital citizenship to our students the way our current regulation is formulated. And I think that's important. They're going to get to college and they're going to have phones everywhere. They're going to get into the workplace. There are going to be phones everywhere. And then one other consideration is there are probably a large number of parents, and maybe the minority, maybe the majority, I don't know. But some percentage of parents are going to feel more comfortable with their students having phones to be able to reach them in emergency circumstances. I don't want to go into detail about what that could be, but certainly some parents feel much more comfortable knowing, their kid can contact them within a few minutes of an emergency to let them know that they're okay by text or whatever. So my feeling is I like where the regulation is now, and I support it the way it is.
I think that we can, because we're not going to be voting, we're not changing the policy at all. We're just adding the regulation. We can discuss it at the full board level to make sure that it's out there in the public domain, and, maybe post it on the website as like, here's an updated, policy with regulation for parents to read and familiarize themselves with our, Madison Public School District's current policy and regulation. And then be done with it. And that way, when I'm sure there are going to be some sort of changes coming from Hartford at some point, then the regulation is an easier thing to update and change instead of the policy. So if there is no more discussion, we'll move on to the next.
How do you see this going forward then? Would you want me to have an agenda item on the next? Okay,
Yeah, I don't really have it as an agenda item. That way we can have a brief discussion on it. I don't think it needs a lengthy discussion. Seth?
Well, I am sensitive to the fact that there are a lot of parents who feel very strongly about this, and they've come and spoken at our meetings. And I do feel like we don't want to give short shrift and make it appear like we're not sensitive to the concerns. I think that where our policy currently, where our regulation falls, probably shows adequate and appropriate sensitivity to those parents' concerns. But
If we have it as an
we
agenda
should
item,
discuss it.
yeah, if we have it as an agenda item, then it will fall under the public discussion of what was previously discussed. And then if anyone wants to come to our meeting and voice their opinion of our policy and regulation, you'll see it on the agenda and know that they can speak to it. All right, moving on. The next policy is 5120.4.2.4, Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, prohibitions of sex discrimination and sexual harassment. The federal requirements under Title IX have changed, and Shipman and Goodwin model is legally updated. They recommend that we address this policy and the related series in the 4000 policy, which is the next item on our agenda, as soon as possible. So these are the two items that must come through policy tonight. 5120.4.2.4, we wish to change to 5120.5, and the name would become Prohibition of Sex Discrimination and Sexual Harassment. This is updated with updated definitions and updated to follow state statute with all of that associated with it. You will notice that the policy itself in the 5000 series under students is much shorter in the new 5120.5, and that the regulation also has a change of number and name to correspond with the policy, and all of the detailed information is in the regulation. So it was a hefty read. I hope everyone got through it with a fine-tooth comb. Essentially, this is just to make sure that we are in compliance with state statute. That there was a big change of definitions: sexual harassment, sex-based harassment, sex discrimination, etc., and all of the updated statutes that go with it, and wording. Is there any discussion, comments, or questions regarding the updated policy and updated regulation? We're good? All good? It's very verbose. Thank you, Shipman and Goodwin. It's just compliance. So
in each year, just to share, we train employees and supervisors differently. Everybody gets one training, but then we do additional training for our administrators and supervisors.
and we have our Title IX coordinator who also handles this and the information about how to contact her or her appointee. It is in the regulation as well. All right, so we will move that forward to the board for rescind and replace with a number change and a title change. The last policy on our agenda this evening follows the exact same reasoning. It's policy 4116.1, sexual harassment. The federal requirements under Title IX have changed, and the Shipman and Goodwin model is legally updated. They recommend that we address this policy and the related Series 5000 policy we just discussed as soon as possible. This is policy 4116.1, prohibition of sex discrimination, including sex-based harassment. That is the new title. and it's in the personnel section, 4,000 series. And this, you'll notice it reads nearly identical, with the updated definitions, and, information and requirements by state statute. It has a new regulation with it, which contains the bulk of the information, just like the previous 5,000 series. So just for anyone who's watching, because this is such a well-attended meeting, the 5,000 series is for students and the 4,000 series is for personnel. So is there any, are there any questions, comments, or concerns regarding this particular policy and its associated regulation? And are we good to go ahead and rescind and replace, send it forward to the board? Good?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Gone through all of the policies and public comment. There must be thousands. Okay, then we can vote to adjourn at 7 o'clock.
Well done.